It's another beautiful apocalyptic morning. Truly a good day to be alive. And then the zombies attacked. I negotiated a peace deal with the zombies by caving their heads in with a stick made of metal. But it's not always about violence. Sometimes you just have to commit to therapy. You might consider gathering to be therapeutic. My goal would be to sew together a bunch of curtains and deerskin into a new and improved backpack. Previously, I waged genocide on literature as I tore the pages off of all the books I found and taught myself how to tailor up a padded backpack. I engaged in therapeutic combat against a zombie with an inflated amount of hit points. He retaliated with a strike, completely ruining last night's dinner. And so, I would spend the day, as I always do, starving to death. At this point, I had learned to coexist with my body's failing functionalities. I then continued to defile the furniture of my deceased neighbors, breaking and entering into homes to inflict maximum destruction to craft my Frankenstein sling bag. It felt as though the zombies were collectively conspiring against me, because anytime I needed anything whatsoever, a horde would be awaiting me to provide trial and tribulation, which brought me a significant chance of failure. I then failed to find a wrench under this very promising sink, but my efforts were compensated with a singular can of soup and some old burnt food that was miraculously absent of malicious bacteria. I conquered Tommy's forehead with my baton and claimed my prize of furniture and curtains, that I then subsequently destroyed. With the materials I gathered, I began sewing curtains and furniture pieces together into a new backpack. I considered this a significant achievement. My inventory space was greatly expanded. There's plenty of rooms for activities. I could travel greater distance and steal more stuff without being too heavy. This was especially important to me because this city was absolutely massive. Seriously though, this city is absolutely enormous. The cities seem to be much larger in this mod because of the new custom POIs that were added. This is much more of an ultra city than a mega city. A good backpack should definitely be one of the first things made when you're starting a new game, because eventually you'll have looted all the nearby buildings and you'll need to travel farther and farther. And you definitely don't want to be weighed down when you run into a cantankerous feral waiting to eat your brains out of your skull. I returned to my brittle fortress and began colliding atoms into my research desk, creating Forge Ahead magazines. My next crafting goal was going to be a forge, another major stepping stone for the progression of my measly existence. I needed workstations to be at 11, that way I could make both the forge and another item called the ceramic crucible. This ceramic crucible allows me to unlock basic forge recipes such as crafting bronze and iron. And it's also needed to craft the bicycle chassis and handlebars. And I'm sure I don't need to explain why it would be really nice to have a bicycle. So more time had passed and I began to reflect on my past actions. I began to wonder if scrapping those wrench magazines was a wise thing to do. It usually doesn't take me long to find a wrench, but my luck was starting to betray me. I was rapidly approaching the bicycle age, and a bicycle is a masterpiece of physics that would make my legs completely obsolete. But you need some particular materials to make such advanced technology. And the materials in particular would ideally be harvested by me using my monkey hands to bash at things with a wrench. And sure, I could just find mechanical parts from broken down mechanical things, but I would need a modest amount of luck to rely solely on loot for mechanical and electrical parts. And I also need wrought iron ingots, which good luck finding that without a wrench. I really needed a wrench, and I needed it soon, because I would someday unlock the workbench. And the workbench in this mod requires a very hefty 50 iron ingots and a large quantity of mechanical parts for me to make. I convinced my brain that the loot room was safe after clearing out the last of the zombies. But then more zombies attacked, hijinks ensued, and the dead walking became the dead sleeping. This lockbox committed armed robbery and stole all 7 of my lockpicks. I had been outplayed by a metal box once again. I respectfully shot an arrow at the handyman's face, barged in the bathroom and assaulted a woman who was passed out. And I ripped all the electronics off the shelves, desecrating the books into fragments in pursuit of my health and happiness. Moe powers are an excellent source of literature, and they're usually found close to the crack-a-books. The shopping centers in town are a fantastic place to commit crime and inflict violence. I felt a little weird saying all that out loud. But the apocalypse is not the place to have good morals. Speaking of moral bankruptcy, this Arlene defiled time and space and launched an assault at me from beneath the world. But she was swiftly brought to justice. They say if you're good, Santa will give you what you want for Christmas, and I wanted a wrench. Evidently, I was not a good person, but I did receive another sham chowder. I immediately scrapped a wrench magazine because I apparently hate myself. And then I committed rooftop genocide and received the best shotgun magazine, the one that lets me craft tube extenders. My brain tricked me into looting this truck, and while it did not have a wrench, it did have a mechanical part, so that was nice. I returned home and ran straight into a spiked trap, twice, and I would once again be going hungry tonight. After dumping a healthy portion of medicine into my incompetent body, I decided enough was enough and began crafting medical magazines. 2 magazines would be enough to expand my mind and develop my fine motor skills into crafting first aid bandages. I then processed eggs and shoved them into my mouth and followed up with a beer. And finally, I would conclude my day by barely concealing myself on top of a roof for the rest of the night. Today was going to be a good day. I started the day off by receiving a black eye from a zombie. Even though the zombies had a clear numerical advantage over my singular existence, I was determined to make the undead an endangered species. A zombie had cleverly hidden behind my back and struck me in the earlobe. Then she did it a second time and I gave myself a tilting sensation. Since expanding my mind in the field of medicine, I have no problem using first aid more liberally since I could just go out and make more. Then I was struck a third time. My understanding of the way this mod works is that every zombie on the map is spawned in and they wander the area. They apparently do not respawn once you kill them, but there's literally no way that's true. I've cleared this area out like 8 times already and these zombies don't really seem like they're wandering around. I might be misunderstanding something here. Or maybe there is just that many zombies and I can't hope to effectively combat the endless waves of my dead neighbors. With the forge unlocked, I set out for the forest in search of animals. Consuming 11 pieces of Forge Ahead magazines has taught me that the forge demands 200 pieces of leather, among other materials. The leather was going to be the most challenging material to get. I successfully failed at killing this deer with my primitive single-shot tube that I found in a dusty box. I cleverly landed an arrow at the back of the deer's head, which did absolutely nothing to him. I chased the deer like a drunk barbarian and began clubbing it, but it was hopeless. The deer led me to the land of never-ending Christmas, an extremely dangerous biome for someone who can't even kill a frickin' deer. I had 3 entire deer in front of me, and I killed absolutely none of them. I was at rock bottom. How could I make technological advances if I could not even successfully hunt a stupid deer? I had to learn how to walk before I could run. But in my drunken stupor, I could not even crawl. I crawled into a modest horde of those weird little mud zombies, and ran face first into my own spiked trap. But I was simply demonstrating to the zombies that spiked traps were perfectly harmless, and it was okay for them to path directly into them. I engaged the enemy deer, and clubbed it in exactly the wrong spot for it to die. And then I got absolutely outplayed once again. I was losing to a species that routinely runs into oncoming traffic. I desperately needed therapy, so I therapeutically cleared out the remaining mud zombies. The zombies were suddenly acting in my best interest when they got themselves slaughtered by a pig. They had weakened this pig, so I started an altercation that would definitely get me killed in 2 hits. But it went down easily and I felt like a human being for the first time today. I used sorcery and witchcraft to transform the animal hides into 30 pieces of leather. I had made just the slightest bit of progress, only just enough to motivate me into continuing my existence. My existence encountered another bountiful harvest of deer. I had hit an arrow directly into its face and it still wouldn't die. My mind entered a state of crisis. I thought perhaps there was a special hunting mechanic, and that I needed to use a different weapon type to inflict adequate damage. I went into psycho mode, and I pursued a deer on foot with a knife. I grew quite tired of the hunt. All of my frustration was channeled electrically into my baton, and I finally inflicted adequate damage into a single stupid deer. My madness had finally produced a method in which I could continuously apply. I had achieved enlightenment after realizing the true purpose of electricity was not to power light bulbs. Instead, it was for humans to assert dominance over nature. I would continue to conduct electricity on wildlife for all eternity, but for right now, I needed to produce advancements in technology. I celebrated my latest and greatest invention by walking straight into my spike traps, because today was just that kind of day. I precariously balanced my masterpiece on this wood-rotted roof and set out to till the earth. It is not enough for me to simply melt rocks. I must have the tools to put things inside so I could forge them into much more useful things. I set out to smash a heavy amount of dirt and rock together and use math and science to create the ceramic crucible. This would allow me to invent my mechanical masterpiece. But I was compelled to pilfer the contents of this abandoned, zombie-infested barn. The wisdom of the barn would impart unto me knowledge on how to create water in its purest form. By stuffing a bunch of flowers and charcoal and boiling water, I was now permitted to make purified mineral water. I stuffed a bunch of dirt and rock inside my cooking pot and began the creation process of a ceramic crucible. The tools had been made. The stage was being set. All I needed to do now was to channel a lethal amount of electricity into a plethora of wildlife. Once again, the major limiting factor was leather, and I needed more than ever to make my bicycle. I had spent the majority of my day successfully failing and failing successfully, and by the end I sacrificed the souls of a great many deer and pig into my bicycle chassis. And for the first time since beginning my measly existence, I had enough food to prevent my stomach from eating itself. I would still need several heaping tablespoons of leather to make the handlebars, but I had evolved from a helpless monkey into a somewhat competent ape. I would distinguish myself from Mother Nature soon enough. Do you wake up wondering what sort of degenerate things you'd do for $1 million? Would you ever stick your hand in a toilet full of dirty infected water for $1 million? When I know, in this world, that sometimes toilets can have perfectly functioning 9mm pistols inside of them, I wouldn't need $1 million to do that. My ability to survive and or thrive is contingent upon my actions that could be considered degenerate in a civilized world. If before the apocalypse you had told me I would be chopping pieces of furniture to be made into a pair of bicycle handlebars, I would have called you crazy. But now I would be calling you crazy if you weren't chopping up furniture in order to craft your sweet new bicycle. Everything that was ever made was just other things smashed together and subsequently glued to improve upon that thing. My pipe baton came from the skin of a dead pig, and the backpack that keeps my knees from collapsing came from curtains and chairs. All things can be broken down and reassembled to suit the needs of the maker. I can break the zombie down and turn his bones into glue. I invited this zombie stripper to be clubbed to death, and she responded by slapping me in the face. After getting my shit slapped, I returned triumphantly to base. I began to speak in tongues and use dark magic to create the final piece for my bicycle. I had officially entered the bicycle age. I slammed an entire bottle of wine and began operating the vehicle. If I wanted to continue pretending to be a civilized human being, I needed to infest a new home with my presence. I got into a disagreement with several zombies and made this house a possible consideration. I was apprehensive to continue, though, because I was fairly sure this was a tier 3 and I was not familiar with this place anyway. I considered a different house, but it had a spooky basement, and while I appreciate the idea of living in a dark hole away from society, I chose to move on. I also considered the Wet's residence, which is a great place for books, but it barely had any decoration. I needed something classier. One crucial way to maintain your vitality is to decorate your home. As you can imagine, this takes a lot of work. A good home to move into would be one that already has the majority of decorations you need. This way, you can immediately start to enter the upper 80s range of vitality, which would give me a handsome boost to my maximum health, stamina, and swing speed. I was feeling a little violent, so I decided to break into this home and take the owner's belongings. I'm sure he didn't mind. I took a break from touring the neighborhood because none of the houses were really doing it for me. Because when you're the lone survivor with access to any house your heart desires, you don't simply settle for good enough. I temporarily distracted myself to look for a wrench, and these gas stations have a microscopic chance of gifting you one. This biker threatened my existence. I pretended he was a deer and electrocuted him. For all of my hard work, I was instead gifted a stone shovel, which was completely deplorable. I reflected on all the choices I made that led me to this decision, and concluded that scrapping all those Scrapping for Fun magazines was the most foolish thing I could have done. In this mod, it takes 20 of these magazines to unlock the wrench. It also takes forged iron and mechanical parts to then make the wrench. It's a lot of trouble and resources to put into something that you can just find. But I had to admit I was wrong. My luck was playing against me. I needed to take control of my destiny, so I started eating Scrapping for Fun magazines. I began to search more magazines, and came upon a completely innocent-looking Tier 1, which was guarded by an entire army of bloodthirsty corpses. I simply didn't have the time to conduct a full raid of the area. There were simply too many zombies. I claimed the content of this box and quickly made my exit. It does seem that every area or chunk had an enormous horde of 20 zombies wandering by it, and if I wanted to safely loot the area, I would simply need to kill them. And I just wasn't at the stage where I could carry out an attack of such scale. But everything changed when I saw the house. This is the house of legend and prophecy. This would be our new permanent residence. I began securing the perimeter because I need the area to be as clear as possible to stage my next move. The zombies weren't going to give this house up without a fight, and since I do not have the currency or the existence of civilization to purchase this home, I needed to win this house by right of conquest and enterprise. This spot would be my staging ground. I had set a few containers and cleared up my bags. I collected some large stones and mashed them together to make a land claim block. The land claim block would allow me to acquire rest within a POI, another important mechanic that helps with maintaining vitality. My plan was to infiltrate the house from behind where the pool was. My brain told me that there were zombies in the pool, and so I declared war on their existence. I made a huge ruckus, which attracted the attention of a gigantic wandering horde. There was no running for me. I had to stand my ground. This zombie applied maximum damage to my face, which would once again completely deplete my food bar. I made a counterattack, which killed the zombie until he died. I applied death to all the zombies that stood between me and my new home. A good home is always worthy of fighting for, and I was willing to fight all the way until my new home was safe. I claimed this house in the name of Mars and made my way home, cutting through downtown and looting all the mailboxes I could. I used the bike to commit multiple felonies as I reached my hand in these mailboxes and stripped the magazines down to their literature components. I then constructed Scrapping for Fun magazines, each of them costing 3 fragments, which hurt my soul. Most magazines only need 2, except Forge Ahead, which needs 5. I could have put those fragments towards a baseball bat or a workbench, but unlocking these recipes would be useless without a wrench. We do what we must. I was highly intoxicated on success, and I began the process of tediously stuffing these large workstations into my small backpack. Unfortunately, there was an incident. Carrying the carpentry bench on my back had paralyzed me. My body was collapsing under the intense weight. I had to set it back down, but then it very slightly lost balance, and then disintegrated into a triangle shape that jutted from the ground. I thought perhaps the alcohol was becoming a bit of a problem, but in my experience, the only time alcohol is a problem is when you don't have any. I would have to double up. The carpentry bench is very easy to replace anyway. It wasn't a big deal. I would need to make multiple trips back and forth, so I collected my things and read my Scrapping for Fun magazines. The dark was looking particularly dark, and the night was full of unspeakable terrors. But it was otherwise a very peaceful night. These glowing mushrooms only grow in the dark, and as far as I know, they do not respawn. It is generally a good idea to pick these when you see them. You might call it a healthy decision. I completed my first trip by stuffing all of my largest and heaviest items into these hefty trash bags, and made my way back for the second trip, picking mushrooms as I went along. You can see that moving is a small process. The weight system really captures the tediousness behind moving. That is why I roosted on that roof for as long as I did. I wanted to wait until I had a bicycle before making a move, because if I had tried moving 6 containers worth of stuff, as well as forges and workbenches, all on foot, it would have taken multiple in-game days, and this move in particular was at least a kilometer away. It just wouldn't have been possible. I usually attempt to nest and infest the nicest home and make my permanent residence there on the first game day. But anytime that fails, I just set my entire life on some shack or roof and then get rained on. But this process will have a payoff that I might describe as significant. It is certainly worth the large inconvenience. This table saw is able to be stolen from a stranger's property. The table saw is a workstation in this mod, and it works by setting it on the table in order to saw the wooden logs. While technically less useful than the carpentry bench, it weighs much less and you can just have it in your inventory. It is much less efficient to create wood from wood logs in your inventory. The table saw does this more efficiently and much faster too. You can also make shafts with it, which is very highly extremely useful for making arrows. It still weighs quite a bit, but it won't cripple you like the carpentry bench will. And now we can begin our siege of the Senor Drogoth's house. This is a tier 3, and even though tier 3s are pretty spooky to do in my rat gear, we can persuade the zombies into running into the spiked traps. There is a dog, and sometimes there are 2 dogs. There can even be a heavy zombie outside. The spawns tend to vary just a little bit. One thing to know about this house, should you decide to move here, there is a guaranteed feral zombie that lives in this house. And he is guaranteed, because he will spawn on day 1, at level 1. Ask me how I know that. And sometimes there's a second feral, regardless of game stage, but not always. You will most definitely get at least one. But I will be taking residence in the attic, well away from where the feral spawns. I desecrated the dog's corpse for a small amount of leather. Suddenly, a spider assaulted me with his horrible noises, and then he immediately died on the spike trap. The house works as intended. I then made a crucial discovery. I discovered there was a second dog, and I viciously crapped my pants when I heard its growl. Nerd polling is disabled in this mod, so you have to fight dogs as the developers intended. This is malicious game design. I maliciously planted a doggy treat on this spiked trap, but it turns out I was the doggy treat all along. I defeated the dog in singular combat and was rewarded with a small amount of leather. The feral lives down the hall on my left side. He stays behind the last room on the right. A feral will bite my head off of my body. So instead, I chose to educate myself instead. I break into the master bedroom and commandeer this king-size bed. King-size beds will allow you to accumulate rest at a much greater rate. And this rest grants you extra vitality, which makes you a combat-capable individual. I committed assault on the 7,000 zombies that lived up here. One by one, I led them out and ended their lives like a psychopath. And don't forget to loot the ultra-secret weapons bag. And when I say weapon, I mean weaponless bag. And no, a stone dagger does not count as a weapon. Give me a pump shotgun. I bumped face first into another zombie and continued my crusade. This room does get difficult at times because the zombies are freaking stupid and will get stuck on the large quantity of objects in the room. I negotiated a peace deal with the zombies by ending their lives. My home was now my home. My one true home. The attic is ugly, but it is very safe. I am stronger than I was on day one, but I am still a feeble monkey armed with a weapon that I fashioned from a dead pig. I do not even possess a gun. I spent a great majority of the morning moving all my things into the attic. I was now living like a rat, but I was king of the rats. But am I truly a king if all my subjects are the flesh-eating dead? My first kingly order was to cleanse the land of my living dead subjects. This area was absolutely crawling with zombies. There was at least 50 of them here. I had a long road ahead of me, and since this road was on insane difficulty, I would almost go insane trying to clean these zombies out. The meta for the early game is to ignore unnecessary fights, but I would be outside of my mind if I allowed 50,000 zombies to gurgle and gargle all day and night without my intervention. I want to point out that you might see me obtain large amounts of 45 ACP and 5.56 ammunition from loot. This was because of a bug, and since filming this bug has been fixed. I maliciously abused this bug by keeping all the ammo I found. I formed a partnership with this friendly pig and I paid him in electricity. I extended my offer to another pig, and I would come home with a healthy supply of meat and leather. I once again stepped into a spike trap and eliminated the zombies that dedicated their lives to annoying me. I gathered a large bundle of wood and nails and resurrected my deceased carpentry bench. Just like the world, my bench was back from the dead. I cleared out a part of my new home. And I'm not kidding when I say this, but I cleared the area like 3 more times when looking through this footage. This video would be multiple hours long if I showed every piece of footage featuring me de-skulling the Horde. I spent the rest of the day doing general chores. I deforested the forest and pulled plants up by their roots. I needed a quantity of wood and plant fiber for my spiked trap factory. I returned to the gas station and got cornered by a zombie. The same horde that chased me out the day before was still there. It was still too much for me to handle. So I gracefully retreated and called it a day. Except the sky. Doesn't the sky look a little red to you? Good lord, today was Horde Day, and I completely forgot the zombie Horde game had zombie Horde days in it. Now, allow me to be perfectly transparent with you. The game is on Insane, and the default speed for Horde Night is Nightmare. It takes an extraordinary amount of time and effort for me to kill just a few jogging zombies. It is on jog speed, but a lot of the zombies seem to sort of walk anyway. I don't know, it's weird. My brain would be completely absent if it thought it could handle the might of insane nightmare zombies. My plan was to maliciously cheese the game by bravely standing on a roof. I mean, come on, I didn't even have a gun to my name. I'm using a pipe baton. So forgive me if I display just the slightest bit of cowardice. I shall make up for my cowardice on the Day 14 Horde. Did you know that zombie birds are the singular most annoying mob in this game? The game had an answer for my antics, but all I had to do was outpace the pecker birds. This mod does not have the enhanced Horde Nights that is in the vanilla game, and this is set to 64 zombies. There's probably 5 zombies down there total. But the mod does make its own enhancements. The birds do spawn in packs of 3 or more, but there is something a little strange going on. The pecker birds were constantly spawning one by one, which is a feature that is completely new to me since last I played this mod. I began to wonder if my antics had activated some sort of anti-cheese mechanic, when suddenly I was put under siege. My semi-pacifist approach to the Horde would see me punished by the presence of this rock thrower. That loud explosive noise would pound my head for most of the night. I challenged the rock thrower to a shooting contest, and it was made very clear to me that the game did not appreciate my antics of standing on a rooftop. My behavior was to be punished. A billion birds had spawned, and all I had was my stupid little stun baton. I would have paid multiple fortunes for a singular pistol, but I was an alcoholic, and alcohol enhanced my stamina regenerative abilities. I was able to endlessly outrun the peckers, and I slowly retaliated. The rock thrower had claimed today was the 4th of July, and he directed his arsenal of fireworks at my existence. My brain commanded my body to wrap itself in bandages like a mummy. But with the exception of World War III popping off in my ears, the night was very peaceful. I poorly concealed myself on top of this massive roof for the remainder of the night. And by the way, the black and white comes from the inconspicuous perk. It turns black and white when I am considered invisible. It is completely worthless for Horde Night since the Horde knows exactly where you are at all times during the blood moon. I spent the remainder of the night playing tic-tac-toe 3 in a row inside of my head. I watched the beautiful blood moon sky transition into the boring, mundane, everyday blue sky. The same blue sky our ancestors observed before everybody died horribly to the zombie menace. In this game, this mod especially, your week generally revolves around making preparations for Horde Night, but I opted to turn the Horde into a minor inconvenience due to a severe lack of planning and preparation. Perhaps one day the Blood Moon Horde would get their way. But there was one thing that was gnawing at me, one thing that utterly consumed my mind. It's day 8 and I still do not have a wrench. Today was going to be my day, the day I get a wrench. I had the insatiable desire to disassemble cars, consuming everything in my path in order to someday make a workbench. But that would be a problem for another episode. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please give a like and subscribe. I will see you guys on the next one.